History is unsurprisingly full of men killing each other. But a few men and women have cast shadows so large that their abrupt deaths led to a ripple effect so profound that we still face them today. Join me as I quickly recount the most famous assassinations in history. In this video, I'll be sharing brief accounts of what the last day on earth looked like for these historical figures. It was March 1544 BC. Julius Caesar woke early. He was not feeling too energetic, having wined and dined late into the night with future triumvir Lepidus. He could have snatched a few hours of much-needed sleep had his wife, Calpurnia, not tearfully warned him of the dream she had. Calpurnia pleaded with her husband to not attend the meeting that day, and Caesar briefly remembered the words of the soothsayer Sporina saying, "Beware the Ides of March." March 1544 BC was the Ides of March, but Caesar wasn't going to pay heed to the threats of a woman. He didn't conquer Gaul and become dictator perpetuo by listening to dreamers and soothsayers. But when the dreamer is your own wife, you have to take her seriously. Caesar spent the whole morning trying and failing to get Calpurnia to calm down, after which he decided to forego the meeting just to put her mind at ease. He even went as far as sending word to his close friend, Marcus Antonius, asking him to cancel the meeting altogether. While this was happening, a group of senators led by Gaius Cassius Longinus and Marcus Junius Brutus, who had long decided that Caesar had got to go, were waiting for him at the Senate's meeting place, the Curia of Pompey. They picked this place because they could get him without having to deal with so many of his supporters. Hearing that Caesar planned to cancel the meeting and getting afraid that the assassination was about to be thwarted, Decimus Brutus, not to be confused with Marcus Junius Brutus, ran to Caesar's house. He jokingly asked Caesar if he was really going to cancel the meeting because of a woman's dreams and the words of foolish men. Caesar decided to attend anyway and went with Decimus Brutus, Marcus Antonius, and a few others. On getting to the Curia, Caesar entered and Marcus Antonius made to follow but was blocked. There was slight confusion at the doorway, and in the press of bodies, someone grabbed Marcus Antonius and shoved him into another room. This was a critical part of the plot, as Marcus was a big man who would have made killing Caesar a tremendous challenge. Caesar sat down and was handed a petition to review, unaware of the fact that close to 70 people in that room wanted him dead. He was in the midst of reading the petition when an impatient Lucius Stilius Cimber started the assassination by grabbing at Caesar's toga and yanking it down. Caesar, shocked, asked, "Why this violence?" The second man to attack Caesar was Casca. He pulled out a small dagger and stabbed Caesar in the back. Caesar's blood was spurting profusely, but he was still utterly confused as to what was happening. "Casca, you villain, what are you doing?" Caesar had a stylus in his hand, a small, slender but wickedly sharp pen he used to write important notes during meetings. Facing Casca, he gripped his arm and stabbed at him with the stylus, but by then 3 more senators had joined, his son-in-law among them. The Curia then became an abattoir. Caesar received about 23 stab wounds in total, 18 of them coming after he had passed out. He was reported to have covered his head with his toga when he saw Marcus Junius Brutus among his killers. Other reports include him asking, "And you, Brutus?" before he died of blood loss, with the killing blow inflicted by a dagger between his ribs, believed to be the handiwork of Casca. After the deed, most of the senators fled to their houses and barricaded themselves, but some ran into the streets of Rome screaming, "People of Rome, we are once again free." The rest is history. Archduke Franz Ferdinand woke up early on the morning on Sunday, June 28, 1914, at the Udija Spa near Sarajevo, where he and his wife Sophie had stayed the night. Sarajevo was the provincial capital of Bosnia, a territory that was just recently annexed by the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Naturally, the Serbians were sorely vexed as their dream of creating a great Serbian state with the ethnic Serbian population of Bosnia was shattered. The Archduke was the closest surviving male heir in the line of succession, being the nephew of Emperor Franz Joseph, who had lost his only son to suicide in 1896. Because of the fragility of the Habsburg dynasty at the point, many Bosnian officials warned him against traveling to the province during such a volatile period. He was informed of several assassination attempts, both foiled and potential, but he refused, filled with a sense of duty towards the empire he was set to inherit. Unlike his traditional uncle, Ferdinand was a modernist, and he believed that the closer he came to the Bosnian Serbs, the faster their integration into the empire would be. Fears and precautions paralyze your life. I would rather put my trust in God than live in a bell jar, worrying over the next nationalist assassin. And so, against all the warnings of members of his personal entourage, Archduke Franz Ferdinand decided he was going to drive through Sarajevo in an open-topped car on a Serbian national holiday. While the royal entourage pulled closer to Sarajevo, a young Ferenc Bosnian student named Gavrilo Princip was getting ready. He and 5 others belonged to a revolutionary movement called Young Bosnia. Their objective was to free Bosnia-Herzegovina from Habsburg rule and establish a southern Slavic state. The young student and his 5 equally young comrades formed an assassination team, funded by a Serbian nationalist group called the Black Hand. The youths, of which 5 out of 6 were below 20, were given bombs, pistols and training in the use of these weapons. The would-be assassins left Belgrade through different secret routes and crossed the border into Bosnia at their own discretion. Serbian Black Hand intelligence agents gave them the Archduke's planned route of passage through Sarajevo, and by dawn they were already in position. The Austrian military commander of Sarajevo had planned to line troops along the way for added security, but he risked offending the locals. The plan was dropped, and security was left in the hands of Sarajevo police, of which just 60 policemen were in attendance that day. Archduke Franz Ferdinand was in the third car of the motorcade with his wife, Duchess Sophie. They had stopped at a military barracks to inspect imperial troops stationed in Bosnia and continued to the Sarajevo town hall at 10 a.m. The first 2 assassins, armed with bombs, most probably lost courage, and as such their positions were passed without incident. The third assassin, Kabrinovic, saw the Archduke's car at 10:10 a.m. and threw his bomb. It hit the folded back cover of the convertible, rolled over and careened into the street behind the car. The second car was not so lucky. The bomb blew it out of action and injured about 20 people. Kabrinovic swallowed the cyanide capsule and jumped into the river. He was fished out and severely beaten by the crowd before getting arrested. The cyanide pill he had swallowed had expired, only causing him to vomit instead of die. The motorcade then sped off, leaving Gavrilo and the other 2 no time to act. The Archduke arrived at the Sarajevo town hall drenched in sweat. This trip had stressed him beyond the limits of his expectations. The mayor was making a speech, but Ferdinand interrupted him, saying, "Mr. Mayor, I came here on a visit and I am greeted with bombs. It is outrageous." His wife, Sophie, then whispered something in his ear, something most probably soothing, because he became visibly calmer and directed the mayor to continue. Afterwards, Ferdinand's speech was brought to him. The paper had been placed in the damaged car and it was stained with blood. It was soon time to depart Sarajevo. The Archduke's Chamberlain, Baron Romaskirch, was of the opinion that the couple remain at the town hall until troops could be brought into the city to line the streets. This was sound advice, but it wasn't taken. mobilize for her Germanic one. Britain and France, wary of a burgeoning Central European hegemon, declared war on Germany, and the planet fell into what was called the Great War, or as we know it today, World War One. Abraham Lincoln usually woke up at 7 a.m. daily, and Friday, April 14, 1865 was no different. He took a walk, nothing unusual for the American president, and by the time he was back, breakfast was ready. It was the usual, 1 egg and a cup of coffee. He ate with his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln. His son, Robert Lincoln, was there too, having just returned from his trip to Appomattox to witness the surrender of General Lee of the Confederate States Army. The American Civil War was finally over, and it was a very happy day. If you were there, Mary Lincoln might have whispered to you that she had never seen her husband that happy ever since their son, Willie, died in 1862. Mary said she had tickets to Grover's Theatre, but she'd prefer to see our American cousin at Ford's Theatre. She also indicated a hope that General Ulysses S. Grant and his wife, Julia Grant, would accompany them to the theatre. Lincoln's killer was up earlier at midnight, writing to his mother. He told her that all was well, but that he was in a hurry. Our cause being almost lost, something decisive and great must be done, he said. Holed up in the National Hotel, John Wilkes Booth spent the early hours of April 14 in his room, scribbling in his diary and preparing his weapons. He meticulously cleaned his .44 caliber Derringer pistol and sharpened his Bowie knife. Booth was a Confederate sympathizer, and he had watched the war go south for the Southerners with flames of anger licking his stomach. He and his co-conspirators had initially planned to kidnap Lincoln and aid the Confederacy, but General Lee's capitulation smashed those plans to pieces. Angry, bitter, and demoralized, they decided to kill Lincoln, Secretary of State William H. Stewart, and Vice President Andrew Jackson. At 9 a.m., Lincoln read the morning newspaper in his office in the White House. His first visitor was the Speaker of the House, Schuyler Colfax, who shared his ideas on post-war policy with the president. At 11 a.m., American President Abraham Lincoln was at a cabinet meeting with General Ulysses S. Grant and others. His mood was hopeful, and he stressed on the men the importance of keeping the peace by employing a conciliatory attitude towards the Confederate South. He also told them about a dream he claimed to always have before major military victories, a dream about him being on a vessel speeding towards a mysterious shore. The meeting ended in the afternoon, and Lincoln spent a few blissful hours with his wife. He was in high spirits, urging that they must be happy after years of mourning their son Willie's passing. Perhaps it was because he was so happy that when he read in the papers news of the arrest of an army deserter, he signed a pardon, saying, "Well, I think the boy can do us more good above ground than underground." At 4 p.m., the day's work was done. Booth, who was a well-known actor at Ford's Theatre, had gone there at noon to pick up mail and learned that the president was going to be there later in the evening. Deciding that the day had come, he quickly arranged for a getaway horse to be placed in the nearby alley and paid a visit to an accomplice named Mary Surratt. He asked Surratt to make a room ready for him in her tavern in Maryland. Lincoln spent the early hours of the evening entertaining his old friends from Illinois, and because of this, they arrived late to Ford's Theatre at 8:30 p.m. The play was stopped, and the orchestra played Hail to the Chief in Lincoln's honor. The president and his wife then took their seats in the presidential box, a dignified place all too familiar to the assassin. Booth met with his co-conspirators for the last time at 8:45 p.m. He assigned Powell to kill Secretary of State William H. Seward at his home, Archduke to kill Vice President Andrew Johnson at the Kirkwood Hotel, and Harold to guide Powell, who was unfamiliar with Washington, to the Seward house, and then to a rendezvous with Booth in Maryland. Archduke up until that point, had thought that the conspiracy involved just a kidnapping. Murder was an entirely different and gruesome thing for him, and so he tried to withdraw, but Booth pressed him to continue. Booth was the only popular member of the conspiracy. Access to the theatre's upper floor containing the presidential box was restricted, and Booth was the only plotter who could have realistically expected to be admitted there without difficulty. Furthermore, it would have been unreasonable, but ultimately incorrect, for the plotters to have assumed that the entrance of the box would be guarded. Had it been, Booth would have been the only plotter with a plausible chance of gaining access to Lincoln, or at least to gain entry to the box without being searched for weapons first. The men agreed to strike simultaneously at the stroke of 10 p.m. and dispersed. In an unfortunate turn of events, General Ulysses Grant was not present at the play that evening, speculations having it that it was because his wife, Julia, and Lincoln's wife, Mary, were not on good terms. More unfortunately, Lincoln's bodyguard stepped out to get a drink. This blend of unfortunate circumstances, in addition to Booth's popularity at the theatre, enabled him to slip into the president's box without being checked for weapons, and after gaining entrance to meet no resistance. Lincoln was laughing at a funny line of the play when Booth walked up and shot him point blank in the back of the head, timing the shot to be drowned out by the sound of laughter from the crowd. Lincoln was thrown forward by the impact, and he fell over when he slumped back in his seat. An army major who shared the president's box with Lincoln wrestled with Booth, who then ditched his pistol for the Bowie knife, with which he stabbed the major. The shooter then jumped out of the box onto the stage and shouted something that sounded like freedom. He fled the theatre to the sound of Mary's screams and general pandemonium. John Fitzgerald Kennedy woke up on the 22nd day of November 1963 in Hotel Texas, now Hilton Hotel, Fort Worth in downtown San Antonio, Texas. It was part of a 2-day 5-city tour of Texas with the sole aim of boosting political support for his 1964 re-election campaign. Texas remains one of the most Republican states in American politics, with Kennedy narrowly winning it in 1960. He did not want a repeat of that in the forthcoming elections, so he planned to visit San Antonio, Houston, Fort Worth, Dallas, and then Austin over 2 days to fix the internal divisions plaguing Democrat politics in the state. John F. Kennedy ate a light breakfast of soft-boiled eggs, bacon on toast, a glass of orange juice, and coffee with hot milk. He then emerged from the hotel to a relatively modest rain-soaked crowd of 8,000 people in the parking lot. He spoke to them, appreciating their presence there that morning and remarking that there were no faint hearts in Fort Worth. It was 8:45 a.m. President Kennedy went back into the hotel to give another speech at the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce. His very fashionable and highly liked wife, Jacqueline Kennedy, wasn't ready, and he knew that he wasn't the only one the crowd came to see. He made jokes about waiting for her to get ready. Approximately 32 miles away at 1026 North Berkeley Avenue in Oak Cliff, Dallas, someone was getting ready too. Lee Harvey Oswald was a worker at the Texas Schoolbrook Depository in Dallas. He did not own a car, so he always hitched a ride to work in his co-worker's car. Lee was taciturn and uncommunicative, but would sometimes talk about his child. That morning, he was silent as usual. His co-worker noticed that he was in possession of a package that he put on the back seat. When inquired about what it was, Lee told him that it was curtain rods. Arriving at work, he got out of the vehicle, retrieved his package and walked on. Lee and his co-worker always walked in together, but this morning was different. President Kennedy and his wife Jackie arrived at the airport in Love Field, Dallas, to large crowds of people waving flags and signs. Some of these people were waving hate signs too, but he didn't mind, marching straight to the fence where the people were. He shook, hugged and greeted as many people as he could until it was time to get into the motorcade. It had been raining lightly earlier that morning, but the rain had fizzled away, causing the president to decide that the top of the car was to be off. It was 11:55 a.m. and the motorcade was en route. The governor of Texas, John Connally, and his wife Nellie were with the Kennedys in the president's car as well. Meanwhile, at the Texas School Book Depository, Lee Harvey Oswald had started his morning shift as an order filler. He worked until 11:55 when he heard that the motorcade had started its crawl to downtown Dallas. Lee was never spotted again by his co-workers after that time. He carried his long package, which he claimed contained cotton rods, and went up to the 6th floor. Perhaps this was coincidental, but a few boxes concealed from view his sniper's nest on the 6th floor window, and he wasn't spotted. It is concluded that there, Lee unfolded his package, which actually contained a Mannlicher Carcano rifle with telescopic sight. He then waited for the motorcade, which had its route published days before the president's arrival, to pass his location. It didn't take long. The president's car was the second in the motorcade, a 1961 Lincoln Continental convertible codenamed SS-100X. It was followed by a third car full of Secret Service agents. There were concerns about leaving the top of the car open, reinforced by a bunch of negative comments and ads in the newspapers, and the spotting of a few dissidents with disparaging signs in the crowds. But Kennedy wanted to be as close as possible to the people, so the president's word was as good as law in this matter. The wife of the governor of Texas, Nellie Connally, was seated beside her husband John. She leaned back and to the right to converse with President Kennedy and said, "Mr. President, you certainly can't say that Dallas does not love you." And to this, the president replied, "No, you certainly can't." Those were his last words, for as the motorcade passed through Dealey Plaza, Lee Harvey Oswald had sight of his rifle trained on the president, and he fired. The first shot missed. It hit the curb, and its fragments injured the passerby. The second shot struck Kennedy in the back, somehow exited his throat, and entered Governor Connally's back, but it wasn't done. Somehow, it went from his back into his wrist, exited, and finally came to rest into the governor's thigh. Lee then fired a third shot, and most agreed that it was the kill shot. This bullet slammed into Kennedy's head under his right ear and exited through the left side. His skull was shattered and he slumped over. Jacqueline Kennedy screamed and chaos ensued.
It will not be long because Truth Crusher will rise again.
The year was 1968. The civil rights movement was on fire like it had never been before, and taking the center stage was the 39-year-old Martin Luther King Jr. In January, he organized the Poor People's Campaign to address the economic inequality and poverty plaguing America at the time. His activism made him involved in the Memphis workers' strike, which sought an end to unfair treatment and low wages for black workers. In March, the protest march organized in support of the strike was cut short due to violent clashes, resulting in the fatal shooting of a 16-year-old black boy. This was the situation into which King returned to in Memphis in April, eager to resume the movement, this time on a more peaceful note. On the morning of April 4, 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. woke up in room 306, a second-floor lodging of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. The owner of the motel would report meeting him in a particularly happy mood that morning. King smoked a lot, but he concealed the habit from the public with utmost care. He smoked for a while on the balcony and then left for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference to organize the march. After much deliberation, it was decided that the march would be held on Monday the 8th instead of the 5th. The meeting ended at 1 p.m., after which King and his close friend and mentor, Ralph Abernathy, had lunch. Abernathy went to take a nap and King went to his brother's room for a chat. Meanwhile, across Memphis, someone else was preparing for the evening. James L. Ray James L. Ray stood waiting. He had purchased a Remington Model 760 Game Master rifle fitted with a scope weeks earlier. Peering through the window, he had a direct view of the Lorraine Motel balcony. At 6:01 p.m., Ray fired. The single bullet struck King in the right side of his jaw. It tore through his neck, severed his spinal cord, and exited through his shoulder. The force of the impact lifted him violently backward onto the balcony floor. Martin Luther King had just been shot. Ralph Abernathy rushed out of the motel room and found King lying motionless in a pool of blood. Others pointed frantically toward the boarding house across the street, shouting the direction from which the shot had come. Reverend Kyles dropped to the ground in shock. One of King's aides attempted mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, while another called desperately for an ambulance. Below, people screamed and scattered across the parking lot. Some fell to their knees in disbelief. Others stood frozen, staring upward at the fallen civil rights leader. Within minutes, an ambulance arrived and transported King to the St. Joseph's Hospital. Doctors worked frantically to save him, opening his chest and attempting emergency surgery, but the damage was catastrophic. At 7:05 p.m., Martin Luther King Jr. was pronounced dead. He was 39 years old. News of the assassination spread across the United States like wildfire. In over 100 cities, riots and unrest exploded almost immediately. Buildings burned, troops were deployed onto American streets, and the nation descended into grief and fury. President Lyndon B. Johnson declared a national day of mourning, while millions watched King's funeral on television days later. The man who had preached nonviolence had been killed by violence, for with a single gunshot fired from a Memphis boarding house, one of the most important voices of the 20th century fell silent forever. The year was 1984. India was on edge. Ethnic and religious tensions had reached dangerous levels following months of unrest in the Punjab region, where Sikh separatists demanded an independent homeland known as Khalistan.
I believe that it is not the task of any one country to say to another what they should do, even if it is a question of helping. It is my duty to put the situation in my country and its neighborhood, to give my assessment of the situation to the leaders of the countries I visit. It is for them then, with their own assessment and what they hear from me, to make up their minds what they think about it and what they should do about it.
Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, determined to crush the growing militancy, ordered Operation Blue Star in June of that year, a full-scale military assault on the Golden Temple in Amritsar, Sikhism's holiest shrine. The operation succeeded militarily, but at a devastating political cost. Hundreds were killed, the temple complex was heavily damaged, and outrage spread rapidly across the Sikh community worldwide. Intelligence agencies warned repeatedly that Gandhi's life was now in grave danger, especially from Sikh members of her own security detail. Despite the threats, Indira Gandhi refused to remove Sikh bodyguards from her protection team. She believed doing so would send a terrible message to India's Sikh minority. Her friends and advisors urged caution, but Gandhi remained defiant. "Aren't we secular?" she reportedly asked. By October, tensions in the country had become unbearable, yet Gandhi continued her routine almost normally, preparing for political meetings and media appearances while attempting to project calm authority to the nation. On the morning of October 31, 1984, Indira Gandhi woke up at her residence at 1 Safdarjung Road in New Delhi. She was 66 years old and had served as India's Prime Minister for nearly 16 years across 2 terms. Despite the strain of recent months, Those around her reported that she had appeared composed and energetic that morning. She dressed in an orange sari with a black border and prepared for a television interview with the British actor and filmmaker Peter Ustinov, who was filming a documentary on her life. Earlier that morning, Gandhi had spoken with aides and gone over her schedule for the day. She walked through the garden paths, connecting her residence to her office, accompanied by members of her security staff and personal attendants. The atmosphere appeared routine. Birds chirped in the trees, gardeners tended the lawns, and staff members moved calmly about the compound. But among the security personnel waiting along the pathway were two men carrying a different burden entirely. Beant Singh and Satwant Singh were Sikh bodyguards assigned to Gandhi's protection unit. Both had become deeply angered by Operation Blue Star and the storming of the Golden Temple months earlier. Though outwardly disciplined and professional, resentment had quietly festered beneath the surface. That morning, they took up their assigned positions near a small wicket gate Gandhi would pass through on her way to the interview. At approximately 9:20 a.m., Indira Gandhi approached the gate on foot. She smiled briefly as she neared the guards. Then Beant Singh drew his revolver and fired 3 shots into her abdomen. As Gandhi collapsed to the ground in shock, Satwant Singh opened fire with his Sterling machine gun. A hail of bullets tore into the Prime Minister at point-blank range. Witnesses described the gunfire as deafening and chaotic, echoing through the quiet garden paths of the compound. Indira Gandhi's body crumpled onto the walkway, drenched in blood. For a brief moment, there was stunned silence. The pandemonium erupted. Security personnel rushed towards the scene, screaming in confusion. Some tackled the assassins, while others desperately attempted to aid the Prime Minister. Beant Singh reportedly dropped his weapon and declared, "I have done what I had to do. You do what you want to do." Indira Gandhi was rushed into a white ambassador car and driven at breakneck speed to the All India Institute of Medical Sciences in New Delhi. Doctors fought frantically to save her, performing massive blood transfusions and emergency surgery, but the damage was catastrophic. She had been struck by more than 30 bullets. At 2:20 p.m., Indira Gandhi was pronounced dead. News of the assassination spread across India within hours, and the country descended into chaos. Anti-Sikh riots erupted almost immediately, particularly in New Delhi, where mobs hunted Sikh civilians through the streets. Homes, businesses, and temples were burned. Thousands of Sikhs were murdered, and in the days that followed, police often stood aside helplessly, or according to many accounts, participated. The assassination of Indira Gandhi shattered the fragile balance holding India together at one of the most volatile moments in its history. For on the quiet garden path in New Delhi, a nation was thrown into flames by the gunfire of its own protectors. The year was 2011. Across the Arab world, governments were collapsing under the weight of mass protests, economic frustration, and decades of authoritarian rule. What began in Tunisia had spread like wildfire into Egypt, Libya, Syria, and beyond in what became known as the Arab Spring. In Libya, the center of attention was Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. The eccentric and iron-fisted ruler had governed the country for over 40 years, and to his supporters, he was the revolutionary who modernized Libya and stood against Western domination.
الأمم المتحدة الجمعية العامة المتحدة بتفتح ملف اغتيال كندي الرئيس الأمريكي. لماذا؟ نبغى نعرفه. قتله واحد اسمه لي هارفي. جاء واحد اسمه جاك روبي قتل لي هارفي قاتل كندي. لماذا قتله؟ اللي جاك روبي إسرائيلي قتل لي هارفي اللي قاتل كندي. لماذا هذا الإسرائيلي يقتل قاتل كندي؟ ثم جاك روبي قاتل كندي مات قبل إعادة محاكمته في ظروف غامضة. لماذا؟ ارجع الملفات لازم نعرفها. انا اللي نعرفها والعالم ممكن يعرفها واللي درسناها في التاريخ ان كندي قرر تفتيش مفاعل ديمونه الاسرائيلي، هل في قنابل ذريه والا لا، وعلشان كده تم تخلص منه.
And that he did. He nationalized the Libyan oil industry, refused loans from the IMF and World Bank, and proposed the gold-backed African dinar to replace the US dollar and French franc for international trade. To his enemies, however, he was a brutal dictator whose regime was built on repression, paranoia, and fear. Or maybe he was a threat to Western economic interests, and so NATO planned and backed a military intervention to take him out. The protests against Gaddafi began in February 2011 in the eastern city of Benghazi. Demonstrators demanded political reform and an end to corruption, but the situation escalated rapidly after security forces opened fire on crowds. Armed rebellion spread across Libya, and within weeks, the country descended into full-scale civil war. Gaddafi appeared on state television repeatedly, vowing to crush the uprising and hunt the rebels house by house.
No demonstration at all in the streets. No one against us. Against me for what? Because I am not president.
But then,
they love me, all my people with me. They love me all.
But if they do love you,
they will die to protect me, my people.
If you say they do love you, then why are they capturing Benghazi and they say they're against you there? Why are they in Zawiya?
It is Qaeda, not my people. It is Qaeda. Qaeda, yes.
But as rebel forces advanced westward, foreign powers intervened.
Tonight, I'd like to update the American people on the international effort that we have led in Libya, what we've done, what we plan to do, and why this matters to us.
NATO launched a bombing campaign against Libyan government positions under the justification of protecting civilians, devastating Gaddafi's military infrastructure and tipping the balance of the war. By August, rebel fighters had captured Tripoli, Libya's capital. Gaddafi vanished from public view. For weeks, rumors swirled regarding his whereabouts. Some believed he had fled the country, others thought he was hiding deep within the desert. In reality, the fallen Libyan leader had retreated to his hometown of Sirte, one of the last major strongholds still loyal to him.
Colonel Gaddafi, the President of the United States, the leaders of Britain and other leaders are calling on you to step down, to leave Libya, to leave your position of power. Will you do that?
Who would leave his homeland? Why do I leave my homeland? Why do I leave Libya?
They say that they've done it because you have ordered force against your people, shooting of protesters.
This is lying, 100%.
On the morning of October 20, 2011, Muammar Gaddafi woke up in a nondescript house in District 2, Sirte, as the city collapsed around him. Rebel fighters had surrounded the area after weeks of brutal urban combat. NATO aircraft circled overhead while artillery fire echoed through shattered streets. Gaddafi, now 69 years old, had spent months on the run, moving constantly between safe houses and underground locations to evade capture. That morning, a convoy of vehicles attempted to break out of Sirte and escape westward. Hidden among the convoy was Gaddafi himself, accompanied by loyal guards, military commanders, and family associates. But the movement did not go unnoticed. As the convoy sped along the outskirts of the city, a NATO drone identified the vehicles. French warplanes and American Predator drones coordinated an airstrike against the column. Explosions ripped through the convoy, destroying vehicles and throwing fighters into chaos. Survivors scattered desperately across the roadside under smoke and debris. Gaddafi escaped the wreckage alive. Disoriented and wounded, he fled with several bodyguards toward a nearby drainage ditch beneath the highway. Armed only with a pistol, the former ruler hid inside the concrete culvert while rebel fighters closed in around him. It did not take long. Rebel militiamen from Misrata discovered the hiding place and dragged Gaddafi out into the open. Video footage captured the chaotic scene. The once untouchable ruler of Libya appeared bloodied, dazed and terrified as armed men screamed around him. Some struck him with rifle butts. Others pulled at his clothing and hair while shouting triumphantly. "What did I do to you?" Gaddafi reportedly cried out. The mob surged around him in confusion and fury. Exactly what happened next remains disputed. Some witnesses claimed Gaddafi was executed deliberately. Others argued he was caught in a crossfire during the chaos. But at some point during the violent struggle, Muammar Gaddafi was shot fatally. The man who had ruled Libya for 42 years was dead. Within hours, images of his body spread across television screens and the internet across the world. Crowds celebrated in the streets of Tripoli and Benghazi, firing rifles into the air and declaring the end of the old regime. Western leaders hailed the collapse of Gaddafi's government as a victory for democracy and liberation. But Libya quickly fractured into rival militias, warlords, and competing governments. Weapons flooded across North Africa, fueling instability from Mali to the Sinai Peninsula. Extremist groups expanded into the power vacuum, and the country descended into years of violence and political collapse from which it has never fully recovered. The death of Muammar Gaddafi, initially planned to be the assassination of a dictator, became the violent destruction of a state. In a dusty drainage pipe outside Sirte, one of the Arab world's longest ruling leaders met his end before the eyes of the entire world. I'm done. Like and subscribe for more.